Sure, it's just the story of Adam and Eve, a beautiful beginning, a simple mistake, and an easy-to-digest moral lesson. That's what they told you. But that's not what happened. Before the Garden of Eden existed, before the first tree, before the first choice, there was already a refusal, not human, but conscious. Satan didn't fall by deceiving. He deceived because he had already fallen. And the reason wasn't power. It was something more silent, harder to admit: rejection. When the order came to bow before the new creation, there was a moment that doesn't appear in common texts, an interval, a pause in heaven itself, because there, for the first time, something created said no, not out of doubt, but out of judgment. I am fire, he is dust. That phrase isn't just contempt, it's philosophy. It's the refusal to accept that value isn't in the material, but in the intention of the Creator. And at that moment, without a scream, without visible war, the universe divides. On one side, obedience. On the other, a consciousness that chooses to resist. And this division was never undone. Then man emerges, not as the center of creation, but as the center of a conflict he never saw begin. Adam opens his eyes without memory, without a past, without reference. And this seems innocent, but it's one of the most disturbing things, because he doesn't know what it is to lose until he loses. And when the rupture happens, when access to the Garden of Eden is closed, what is born is not just suffering, it's awareness of one's own failure. And that is much worse. Eve realizes it first, not the mistake, but its weight. There's a brutal difference between doing something wrong and realizing that you changed the structure of reality by doing it. She doesn't try to justify it. She doesn't try to forget. She tries to erase. And that's why she enters the water, not as a symbol, but as a desperate attempt to undo the irreversible. Days pass. Her body trembles. Her skin gives way. But she remains, because she believes in something that every human, on some level, believes: that enough pain can reverse guilt. Adam goes further. He doesn't just seek purification, he seeks punishment. He remains submerged, motionless, in silence for 40 days, without an audience, without guarantees, without answers. This is the first human ritual, and it's not one of faith, it's one of despair, because when there isn't yet a language for redemption, the only path left is suffering. But what makes it all the darker is that it doesn't end there, because the mistake doesn't just open the door to pain, it opens the door to manipulation, and Satan returns, not as before, not as something frightening, but as something soothing, a luminous presence, calm, convincing. He doesn't offer power, he offers comfort. You have been heard. That phrase is more dangerous than any outright lie, because it doesn't attack the mind. It embraces the pain. Eve, weakened, doesn't respond with logic. She responds with hope. And hope, when misdirected, is one of the most destructive forces that exist. She follows. She believes. She trusts. And for a moment, almost returns. But it wasn't a return. It was repetition. And this reveals something few realize. The greatest risk is not making a mistake once. It's making a mistake, trying to fix the previous one. When Adam finds her, it's too late for innocence. Now they are not just guilty, they are aware of their own vulnerability. Time passes, and something begins to happen to Adam's body. Not violently, but inevitably. A silent failure, as if the very structure of life were shutting down, cell by cell. He feels it, before he understands, and then he realizes something no human being before him had ever had to face: the end. But how can one fear something that never existed before? How can one understand death without a reference to death? He calls Ava, not to ask for help, but to leave something recorded, not in stone, but in memory. When this happens, he doesn't say if, he says when. Don't blame only yourself, but the weight is already there, and it cannot be shared, because some choices don't accept half the responsibility. The moment arrives, without dramatic sound, without announcement, just an interruption, breath, pause, and then absence. the first absolute silence in human history. But what happens next is the detail that transforms everything. There is no abandonment, there is no forgetting, there is presence. The body is not discarded, it is treated, prepared, observed, as if, despite the flaw, there was still value. And this completely breaks the simplest logic of the story, because if it were only punishment, there would be no care. If it were only condemnation, there would be no testimony. Then the question arises that no one asks: why does something imperfect still receive dignity? And perhaps the answer is the most uncomfortable part of all. Perhaps it was never about perfection. Perhaps it was about choice, not the choice to err, but the choice to continue after erring. And this completely changes the meaning of the fall, because it ceases to be the end of something perfect and becomes the beginning of something conscious, something that feels, something that fails, something that tries, even without a guarantee of redemption. And perhaps that's exactly why this version of the story isn't the most told, because it doesn't talk about an old mistake. It talks about you. So, it's over. Adam's body fell, silence came, and that's it. That's what would make sense. But that's not what happened, because the problem was never the body, it was what continued after it. There's a detail in the apocalypse of Moses that almost goes unnoticed. An interval, a moment where nothing happens, and precisely because of that, everything changes. Death doesn't erase, it displaces. Consciousness doesn't disappear, it is guided. And that should bother you more than any punishment, because it means the mistake doesn't end, it just changes location. And meanwhile, the world goes on. Ava remains alone, but it's not loneliness that weighs her down. It's something more subtle. Continuity. Breathing still exists. Days still pass. Children still live. And then the realization arrives. Slow, cold, irreversible. The fall wasn't an event. It was the beginning of a pattern. And patterns don't ask permission. They just continue. Maybe you've seen this before. Not as history, but as repetition. Same choices, same mistakes, just with different names. But that's coincidence, right? Or at least, it's more comfortable to believe that. Ava observes in silence, because now she understands something that wasn't possible before. Consciousness doesn't prevent anything, it only reveals. And what she sees is herself, multiplied, in gestures, in decisions, in the mistakes that no one taught her, but everyone repeats. The fall became an inheritance, and inheritances cannot be returned. So she does the only thing that still seems possible. She speaks, not like someone telling a story, but like someone trying to stop something. She gathers her children and describes, not the mistake, but the process, how it began, how it deceived, how it repeated itself, as if understanding were enough to prevent it. But there's a silent flaw in that. The more you understand a pattern, the closer you are to it, because now you can recognize it. And recognizing is not the same as resisting. Sometimes it's the beginning of conscious repetition. Time passes, and Ava's body begins to follow the same path, slower, heavier, as if life were slowing down. Her hands no longer respond as before. Her breath falters for moments. Her body learns to stop. But this time, there is no despair. There is no river. There is no punishment. There is no attempt to negotiate with the inevitable. There is something different, something denser, acceptance, but not that light acceptance that seems like peace. It is a burdened acceptance, full of memory, full of understanding, full of everything she saw and couldn't change. Perhaps this is the only real acceptance, the one that comes too late to alter anything. She looks at her children and no longer tries to stop them, because now she knows this is no longer about individual choice. It's about condition, being conscious and still failing. This is the true weight of existence. The moment approaches, without announcement, without sign, just a silent transition, breath, pause, and then absence. But unlike before, this doesn't seem like an end. It seems like continuity, because now there are two on the other side. But here's the detail that almost no one notices. Nothing is resolved. Nothing is closed. There is no conclusion. There is tension, constant, between what was done and what is still happening. Because the story didn't stay with them. It continued, in their children, in their descendants, in the invisible patterns that cross generations, without ever being completely interrupted. But of course, that's just an old narrative. It has nothing to do with now, nothing to do with you. Does it? Because if you look closely enough, you'll notice something uncomfortable. The mistake didn't end, it transformed. Consciousness didn't resolve it, it deepened it. And the fall didn't end, it continues, in small decisions, in almost invisible repetitions, in moments where you know, and yet you do it. But this is different, of course. It always seems different, until it isn't. And perhaps this is the most dangerous detail of all. You're not listening to a story, you're recognizing a pattern. And patterns don't exist just to be understood. They exist to be continued or interrupted. But that was never guaranteed. The story hasn't ended. It just changed protagonists. And you didn't enter it by chance.